My name is Sarah Mitchell, and this is the story of how my family threw me away like garbage, only to come crawling back when I became someone they couldn't ignore. It started 20 years ago, when I was just 18 years old. I was the oldest of 3 children in what appeared to be a normal middle-class family in suburban Chicago. My father, Robert, worked as a regional bank manager. My mother, Patricia, was a real estate agent who never quite made it big, but always acted like she was one deal away from fortune. My younger siblings, Jake and Emma, were 15 and 12 at the time. We weren't rich, but we weren't poor either. We lived in a decent 3-bedroom house, took 1 vacation a year, and had enough for the basics plus a little extra. I thought we were happy. I thought my parents loved me. I was wrong. Everything changed the summer before my senior year of high school, when my cousin Vanessa came into our lives like a golden meteor, blazing with wealth and privilege that made my parents' eyes glitter with envy and ambition. Vanessa was my father's niece, the daughter of his older brother, Uncle Charles. Uncle Charles had married into serious money. His wife, Aunt Margaret, came from old money that had been invested wisely for generations. They lived in a mansion in Connecticut, traveled the world, and Vanessa had everything a girl could want: designer clothes, a Mercedes for her 16th birthday, and admission to an Ivy League school that her parents' donation had certainly helped secure. For years, we'd only seen them at major holidays, and there was always this unspoken tension. My father resented his brother's success. My mother would make snide comments about some people having it easy. But that summer, everything changed. Vanessa decided she wanted to experience normal life before college, and somehow convinced her parents to let her spend the summer with us. From the moment she walked through our front door with her Louis Vuitton luggage and her practiced smile, I knew my life was about to become hell. I just didn't know how bad it would get. At first, the changes were subtle. My mother started paying more attention to Vanessa's opinions about furniture placement and home decor. My father would come home from work and ask Vanessa about her day before acknowledging me. My siblings gravitated toward her like she was the sun, and they were planets desperate for her warmth. "Sarah, why don't you dress more like Vanessa?" my mother would say, eyeing my thrift store jeans with disapproval. She always looked so put together. "Sarah, Vanessa was telling me about this investment opportunity," my father would say at dinner. "You know, she really understands finance. You should pay attention instead of wasting time with those books of yours." I was reading business and economics books, preparing for my future. I had dreams of starting my own company someday. I had a 4.0 GPA and had been accepted to the state university on a partial scholarship. I was working 2 part-time jobs to save money for the rest of my tuition and expenses. I was trying so hard to make them proud, but nothing I did mattered anymore. Vanessa didn't work. She didn't need to. She spent her summer shopping, going to parties, and posting pictures on social media that made my mother beam with pride, even though they weren't her daughter. She would casually mention her family's connections, the powerful people she knew, the opportunities that existed in her world, and my parents ate it up like starving animals at a feast. "You know," my mother said one night in late July, "Vanessa mentioned that her father's company is looking for summer interns. Real positions with real pay, not like those minimum wage jobs you're working, Sarah." "I'm fine with my jobs, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm saving for college." "About that," my father interjected, exchanging a look with my mother that made my stomach drop. "We need to talk about your college plans." That conversation changed everything. They told me that they had decided to redirect my college fund, the money they'd been saving since I was born, the money they'd always promised would help me get an education, to Jake. He was showing real promise in football, and they wanted to make sure he could attend any school that recruited him, plus have money for training and equipment. "But what about my scholarship?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I still need money for housing, books, food." "You're resourceful, Sarah," my mother said dismissively. "You'll figure it out. Besides, Vanessa was saying that maybe college isn't for everyone. Maybe you should consider a gap year, work full-time, get some real-world experience." "Vanessa said that?" I felt like I'd been slapped. "She makes a good point," my father added. "Not everyone is cut out for higher education. Jake has real talent. Emma is showing promise in music. We need to invest in sure things. I was the sure thing. I'd always been the sure thing. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, never asking for anything, always trying to make them proud. And now I was being tossed aside for a cousin who didn't even live here, and a brother whose football career might never materialize. But the worst was yet to come. 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave for college, I came home from my shift at the diner to find my parents, Vanessa, and my siblings gathered in the living room. There were suitcases by the door. My suitcases. "Sit down, Sarah," my father said, his voice cold and businesslike. "We need to discuss your future." I sat, my heart pounding, knowing that whatever came next was going to shatter my world. "Your mother and I have been talking with Vanessa and her parents," he began, "and we've come to realize that we've been enabling your lack of ambition." "Lack of ambition?" I repeated, stunned. "I have a 4.0 GPA. I was accepted to a state school," my mother cut in. "Sarah, let's be honest, you're not Ivy League material. You're not like Vanessa. You don't have her polish, her connections, her potential." Each word was a knife. "Uncle Charles and Aunt Margaret have generously offered to help Jake and Emma with their futures," my father continued. "They've agreed to pay for Jake's football training and Emma's music lessons. They've even suggested that Emma might spend next summer with them in Connecticut. But only if we show that we're serious about investing in quality," my mother added. "They don't want to waste their generosity on people who won't make the most of it." I looked at Vanessa, who sat there with a slight smile, examining her manicured nails. "What are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew. I could feel it coming like a storm. "We're saying it's time for you to be independent," my father said. "You're 18, legally an adult. And frankly, Sarah, we need your room for when Emma's music teacher comes for extended sessions. Vanessa's parents are paying for a live-in instructor." "You're kicking me out?" I whispered. "We're encouraging your independence," my mother corrected. "You'll thank us one day. This is what you need. Real-world experience. You can get a full-time job, find a roommate, live your life. Meanwhile, we can focus on the children who are still minors and who actually have promising futures." I looked at my siblings. Jake wouldn't meet my eyes. Emma was crying silently, but she didn't speak up. No one spoke up for me. "You have until tomorrow morning," my father said. "We've already called the university and withdrawn your enrollment. The partial scholarship has been forfeited. It's for the best, Sarah. You'll see." I spent that night in my childhood bedroom, my former bedroom, packing my life into 2 suitcases and a backpack. I had $3,000 in savings from my 2 jobs. No car, no college enrollment, and no family. At 6 a.m., they put me and my suitcases on the front porch. My mother handed me a garbage bag with some additional clothes. "This is for your own good," she said. Then she closed the door. Through the window, I could see Vanessa coming down the stairs in her silk pajamas, yawning, ready to start another day in my home, with my family, living the life that should have been mine. I picked up my bags and started walking. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know how I'd survive. But I made myself a promise that morning, standing on that porch at sunrise. I would make them regret this. Every single one of them. The first 3 months were the hardest of my life. I ended up at a women's shelter, sharing a room with 5 other women, all of us broken by life in different ways. I kept my 2 jobs at the diner and the grocery store, working 16-hour days, saving every penny. I showered at the gym using a membership I could barely afford. I ate ramen and whatever leftovers I could take from the diner. I was homeless. I was alone. I was furious. But I refused to break. During my breaks at work, I'd go to the public library and use the computers. I read everything I could about business, entrepreneurship, investing, and technology. I took free online courses. I watched lectures from top universities on YouTube. If I couldn't go to college, I'd educate myself. One day at the library, I met Margaret Chen, a 50-year-old woman who came in every day to use the computers. She was a software engineer who'd been laid off and was looking for work. We started talking during my breaks. "You're reading about coding," she observed one day, looking at my screen. "You interested in tech?" "I'm interested in anything that can make me successful," I told her honestly. She smiled. "I like your attitude. Tell you what, I'll teach you to code if you help me practice my interview skills. Deal? It was the first kindness anyone had shown me in months. I almost cried. Margaret became my mentor and my friend. Every day, she taught me programming languages, Python, JavaScript, SQL. She taught me about software development, about tech industry trends, about how to think like an engineer. In return, I helped her prepare for interviews, gave her feedback, and encouraged her when she felt defeated. 3 months later, Margaret got a job at a startup. A month after that, she convinced them to hire me as a junior developer, even though I had no formal education in computer science. Your work ethic and hunger to learn matter more than a degree, she told me. Plus, you're talented. Trust me. The job paid $45,000 a year, more money than I'd ever seen. I got an apartment, a tiny studio with a hot plate and a bathroom the size of a closet, but it was mine. I bought my first laptop. I worked 12-hour days, learning everything I could, taking on every project, volunteering for every challenge. And at night, I planned my future. Over the next 5 years, I became obsessed with success. I worked at 3 different startups, each time learning more, building my skills, making connections. I lived like a monk. No unnecessary expenses, no social life, just work and learning. By the time I was 23, I was a senior software engineer making 6 figures. I'd taught myself not just coding, but product management, business strategy, and market analysis. I'd saved $200,000. That's when I met David Park. David was a brilliant engineer who just left Google with an idea for a new kind of cloud computing platform. He had the technical vision, but needed someone who understood both code and business. We met at a tech conference, and he pitched me his idea over coffee. I need a co-founder, he said. Someone technical who can also help build and run the company. I've been watching your work. You're exactly what I'm looking for. What's the catch? I asked. No salary for at least a year. Equity only. We'll need to raise funding, and it might fail completely. But if it works... He grinned. We could change everything. I invested my entire savings into our startup, which we called NextCloud. I became the COO and co-founder. David and I worked 100-hour weeks for 18 months, living in a tiny office, surviving on pizza and energy drinks. We nearly failed 6 times. We were rejected by 43 investors. We had to pivot our business model twice. There were nights when I cried from exhaustion and frustration, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But we didn't give up. Our breakthrough came when a major tech company's cloud system failed, causing millions in losses. They needed a more reliable solution, and they needed it fast. NextCloud had exactly what they needed. That contract led to others. Within 3 years, we were the fastest growing cloud computing company in the industry. When I was 28, we took NextCloud public. My equity was worth $400 million. At 28 years old, I was a self-made multimillionaire, but I didn't stop there. I invested in other startups, built a venture capital portfolio, and started a second company focused on AI integration. By the time I was 32, my net worth had crossed $1.2 billion. I'd done it. I'd gone from homeless to billionaire in 14 years, and I'd done it completely on my own. I didn't reach out to my family during those 14 years, not once. I changed my phone number. I moved to San Francisco, then Seattle, then New York. I became someone else, someone successful, someone powerful, someone they wouldn't recognize. But I kept tabs on them. Oh yes, I kept very close tabs. Jake's football career never materialized. He had a minor injury his freshman year of college and never recovered his speed. He dropped out and was working as a sales associate at a car dealership, divorced with 2 kids he could barely afford. Emma's music career was similarly disappointing. She'd shown promise but lacked discipline. She gave up after a few years and was now working as an administrative assistant, unmarried, living in a 1-bedroom apartment. My parents had downsized to a small condo after my father took early retirement due to health issues. My mother's real estate career had fizzled out. They were living on Social Security and modest retirement savings, struggling with medical bills, and Vanessa, golden, perfect, privileged Vanessa, she'd married rich, even richer than her own family, and promptly got divorced 3 years later. The prenup had been airtight. She got nothing. Her parents, meanwhile, had lost a significant portion of their wealth in bad investments during the 2008 financial crisis. They were still comfortable, but no longer the mega-rich dynasty they'd once been. Vanessa was now living off a trust fund that gave her enough to maintain appearances, but not the lifestyle she was accustomed to. She worked, if you could call it that, as a lifestyle consultant and influencer, with a modest following and even more modest income. I learned all this through private investigators and public records. I wanted to know everything before I made my move. And then, in the spring of my 33rd year, opportunity knocked. My venture capital firm was looking to expand into Chicago. We needed office space in a prime location, and my team found the perfect building, a beautiful historic property that had been converted into luxury condos and commercial spaces. The building was owned by a struggling real estate investment company that was desperate to sell. When I looked at the investor list, I almost laughed. Uncle Charles was one of the primary investors. He'd sunk millions into the property right before the market crashed, and it had been bleeding money ever since. They were desperate to find a buyer before foreclosure. I bought the entire building for $45 million, well below its value, but all they could get. I restructured it, brought in high-end tenants, and turned it into one of the most prestigious addresses in Chicago within 6 months. Uncle Charles lost everything he'd invested. I made sure of it. But that was just the beginning. Through my network, I discovered that the car dealership where Jake worked was for sale. The owner wanted to retire. I bought it through a shell corporation, restructured the business, and brought in new management. Jake wasn't fired, I'm not cruel, but his commissions were adjusted to performance-based metrics. He'd been coasting on personal relationships and laziness. Now he actually had to work for his money. I bought the company where Emma worked as well. Again, I didn't fire her, but I implemented strict performance standards. For the first time in her life, Emma had to actually earn her place. I didn't reveal my identity in any of these transactions. To them, these were just corporate reshufflings. They had no idea I was behind any of it. And then I made my move on the real targets, my parents and Vanessa. The invitation was simple and elegant. You are cordially invited to the grand opening of the Mitchell Foundation for Underprivileged Youth. Join us for an evening of celebration as we announce scholarship programs, mentorship initiatives, and support systems for young people who have been failed by their families. I'd started the foundation with $100 million of my own money. It provided college scholarships, housing assistance, job training, and mental health services to young people who'd been kicked out by their families or faced homelessness. It was my way of helping others avoid what I'd gone through. The grand opening was a major event. Mayors, celebrities, business leaders, everyone who mattered in Chicago would be there. And I made sure every member of my family received an invitation. The invitation was in my name, Sarah Mitchell, founder and CEO. I knew they'd come. Curiosity, if nothing else, would drive them there. Would they recognize my name? Would they remember they had a daughter and sister named Sarah? Or had I been erased so completely that even my name meant nothing to them? The night of the gala, I stood in front of a mirror in my penthouse suite, barely recognizing myself. The scared, hurt 18-year-old girl was gone. In her place stood a woman in a custom Armani gown with diamond earrings worth more than my parents' condo, looking every inch the billionaire CEO I'd become. I'd survived. I'd thrived. And now I'd face them. The ballroom was magnificent, all crystal chandeliers and gold accents filled with Chicago's elite. I worked the room, giving interviews, thanking donors, explaining the foundation's mission. Every time I talked about young people being abandoned by their families, I felt the old wounds throb. And then I saw them. They came in as a group, my mother, my father, Jake, Emma, and yes, Vanessa. They looked older, smaller somehow. My parents looked worn down by life. Jake had gained weight and lost hair. Emma looked tired. And Vanessa, oh Vanessa, she was still beautiful, but there was a hardness to her now, a desperation in the way she clung to her designer purse, probably a knockoff. They were scanning the room, looking for the host, trying to figure out why they'd been invited to such an exclusive event. I took a deep breath and walked toward them. My mother saw me first. She looked right at me, and I saw nothing. No recognition, just the polite smile of someone trying to place a vaguely familiar face. "Excuse me," she said as I approached. "We're looking for Sarah Mitchell? We received invitations, but there must be some mistake. We don't really run in these circles." I smiled. "No mistake, Mrs. Mitchell. I'm Sarah Mitchell." There was a beat of silence. I watched as confusion crossed their faces, then slowly, agonizingly slowly, recognition began to dawn. "Sarah?" my father whispered. "Our Sarah?" "Your Sarah?" I repeated, letting acid drip into my voice. I wasn't aware I belonged to anyone, especially not to people who threw me out like garbage when I was 18. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Jake looked like he'd been punched. Emma started crying immediately, and Vanessa went pale. "Oh my God," my mother breathed. "Sarah, this is your foundation? You're a billionaire?" "Actually, my net worth is currently $1.4 billion, I corrected her. "Give or take a few million depending on the stock market. It's hard to keep track." The little group drew stares. People were starting to notice the drama unfolding. "Sarah," my father said, stepping forward, "we had no idea. We thought—" "You thought what, Dad? That I'd died in a gutter somewhere? That I'd failed just like you predicted? That I wasn't Ivy League material or worth investing in?" "We need to talk," my mother said urgently, looking around at the growing audience. "In private. Please, Sarah. We're family." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Family? You want to talk about family now? Fine. Follow me." I led them to a private room, off the main ballroom. Once the door closed, they all started talking at once. "Sarah, we made a mistake. We never stopped thinking about you. We tried to find you." "Stop," I said, my voice cutting through their excuses like a knife. "I don't want to hear your lies. I know exactly what happened. You chose Vanessa and her family's money over your own daughter. You took my college fund and gave it to Jake for a football career that never happened. You kicked me out at 18 with nothing because you wanted to impress rich relatives and get your other children into their good graces." "It wasn't like that," my mother protested weakly. "Yes, it was exactly like that," I shot back. "Do you want to know what happened after you threw me out? I was homeless. I lived in a shelter. I worked 16-hour days just to survive. I ate garbage. I showered at a gym. I had nothing." Emma was sobbing. Jake had his head in his hands. My parents looked stricken. Vanessa was silent, staring at the floor. "But you know what?" I continued, my voice stronger now. "Being homeless was better than being in your house, because at least in that shelter, no one was telling me I was worthless. No one was comparing me to a cousin and finding me lacking. No one was taking away my dreams to fund someone else's." "We were wrong," my father said, tears streaming down his face. "Sarah, we were so wrong. We got caught up in status and money and you threw away your daughter for it," I finished. "Well, congratulations. You bet on the wrong horse. Jake's a car salesman, at a dealership I own, by the way. Emma's an admin assistant at a company I own. You're both living on Social Security in a condo. And Vanessa, how's that lifestyle consultant career working out? Getting enough Instagram sponsors to pay for rent?" Vanessa finally looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I was young and stupid and jealous." "Jealous?" I repeated. "Jealous of what? You had everything." "I was jealous of how smart you were," she said. "How hard you worked. How much potential you had. I had money and connections, but I knew I didn't have your drive or your brains, so I made sure your parents saw only what I had, not what you had. I whispered in their ears. I made suggestions. I planted seeds. I wanted them to choose me because deep down, I knew if they actually paid attention to you, they'd realize you were worth 1,000 of me." The admission hung in the air like poison. "So you destroyed my life because you were insecure?" I said quietly. "Yes," she whispered, "and I've regretted it every day since." I looked at each of them, these people who had shaped my childhood and then shattered my adolescence, these people who shared my blood but had shown me no loyalty. Why are you here? I asked. And don't lie. I'll know. My mother and father exchanged glances. We need help, my father finally admitted. Medical bills, Dad's heart condition. We're drowning in debt. When we got the invitation and saw your name, we hoped. You hoped I'd give you money, I finished. After everything you did, you came here hoping to cash in on the daughter you threw away. We're family, my mother said desperately. Blood is blood, Sarah. We made mistakes, but we're still your parents. We still love you. Do you? I asked. Did you love me when you gave away my college fund? Did you love me when you kicked me out? Did you love me during the 14 years you made no effort to find me, even though I'm one of the most famous female CEOs in America? My face has been on magazine covers. I've given TED Talks. I've been interviewed on national television. If you'd wanted to find me, you could have. But you didn't look because you didn't care. The silence was damning. What do you want from us? Jake asked quietly. Do you want us to beg? We'll beg. Do you want us to admit we destroyed the life of the best person in this family? We'll admit it. Just, please, Sarah. We need help. I looked at them. Really looked at them. They were broken people. Life had not been kind to them, but then again, they'd made terrible choices. They'd valued money and status over character and love. They'd gambled on the wrong things and lost. Part of me wanted to tell them to go to hell. Part of me wanted to watch them suffer the way I'd suffered. Part of me wanted revenge in its purest, cruelest form. But another part of me, the part that had survived homelessness and poverty, the part that had built something meaningful from nothing, the part that had started a foundation to help others, that part knew that revenge wouldn't heal the wounds they'd inflicted. Here's what's going to happen, I said finally. I'm going to pay off your medical debts, Dad. All of them. And I'm going to set up a trust that will give you and Mom a modest monthly income. Enough to live comfortably but not extravagantly. $50,000 a year. My mother gasped. My father started crying. But, I continued, holding up a hand, you will never ask me for more. You will never use my name to open doors or gain access. You will never tell anyone I'm your daughter unless I give you explicit permission. In public, we are strangers. In private, we are estranged family members with a business arrangement, nothing more. Sarah, please, my mother started. I'm not finished, I cut her off. Jake, Emma, I'm going to honor the investment your parents made in you, even though it came at my expense. I've set up educational funds for your children, Jake. They'll go to college no matter what. Emma, I've arranged for you to receive management training at your company. If you prove yourself, you'll be promoted. If you don't, you'll be fired based on merit, like anyone else. I'm giving you both opportunities, but what you do with them is up to you. They both nodded, too stunned to speak. Then I turned to Vanessa. She met my eyes, and I saw genuine remorse there. Maybe it was real, maybe it wasn't. I didn't care anymore. Vanessa, you destroyed my family relationships because of your own insecurity. You manipulated people and ruined my life for your own ego. For that, you get nothing from me. Not money, not connections, not forgiveness. You'll have to live with what you did, just like I had to live with the consequences. I understand, she whispered. Now, I said, moving toward the door, we're going to go back to that gala. You're going to leave. You're going to receive information from my lawyer about the trusts and arrangements, and then we're going to live our separate lives. Do you understand? They all nodded. One more thing, I said, my hand on the door handle. I need you all to understand something. I didn't build this life to prove you wrong or to get revenge, though that's a nice bonus. I built this life because I refused to let your betrayal define me. I refused to be the victim. I took the worst thing that ever happened to me and used it as fuel to become someone extraordinary. I opened the door, then looked back one last time. You didn't break me. You freed me. Because if you hadn't thrown me out, I might have stayed in your mediocre world, living a mediocre life, never knowing what I was capable of. So in a twisted way, I should thank you. You showed me that I couldn't rely on anyone but myself, and myself turned out to be enough. I walked back into the gala, leaving them in that room with their regrets and their second chances. The foundation gala raised $50 million that night. The story of my journey, from homeless teenager to billionaire CEO, became public within weeks. I didn't hide it anymore, I owned it. Magazine covers followed, From Poverty to Power, Sarah Mitchell's Incredible Journey. TED Talks, interviews. My story inspired thousands of young people who'd been abandoned or betrayed by their families. I never had a relationship with my parents again. They took the money, lived their quiet lives, and we never spoke beyond the occasional email update facilitated by lawyers. They died within months of each other when I was 42. I paid for their funerals and didn't attend. Jake took advantage of the opportunity I gave him. He worked hard at the dealership, eventually became manager, and his kids graduated from college debt-free. We have a cordial relationship now. Not close, but not hostile. He sends Christmas cards. Emma rose through the ranks at her company and eventually became a director. She married a good man, had a child, and sends me birthday texts. We've had coffee twice in the last decade. It's enough. Vanessa faded from my life completely. I heard she moved to Europe, married a minor aristocrat, and lives a quiet life. We've never spoken again. My company, NextCloud, continues to grow. I've started 4 more companies, invested in hundreds of startups, and helped build an empire. My foundation has helped over 50,000 young people escape poverty and family abandonment, and I eventually met someone, a fellow entrepreneur named Marcus, and we built a life together. We have 2 children now, ages 7 and 5. I've made sure they know their value has nothing to do with money or status. They know their mother's story. They know that family is something you choose, not just something you're born into. People always ask me if I'm happy, if all the success and money and revenge made me whole again. The truth is complicated. The money, the success, they're nice. They provide security and freedom and opportunity. They allowed me to help others and build something meaningful. But they didn't heal the wounds my family inflicted. Time did that. Therapy did that. Building a chosen family of friends and colleagues who valued me for who I was, that did that. The revenge? It was satisfying, I won't lie. Seeing my family realize what they'd lost, seeing them come begging, being able to look them in the eye and know I'd proven them all wrong. Yes, that felt good. But the real victory wasn't becoming a billionaire or watching them fail. The real victory was surviving. It was refusing to let their betrayal destroy me. It was building a life so full and rich and meaningful that they became irrelevant. I went from homeless to CEO not because I wanted to prove them wrong, but because I wanted to prove myself right. I wanted to prove that I was worth something, that I had value, that I deserved more than the life they'd tried to give me. And I did. Would I change what happened if I could? Would I go back and prevent them from kicking me out, from choosing Vanessa over me, from taking my college fund? Some days, yes. The trauma of those early years still haunts me. I still have nightmares about being homeless. I still feel a pang of pain when I see happy families together. But most days, no. Because that trauma forged me into someone strong, someone resilient, someone who built an empire from nothing. It gave me empathy for others who struggle. It motivated me to help tens of thousands of young people avoid the hell I went through. My family chose my rich cousin over me because they thought money and status were the most important things in the world. They were wrong. Character is what matters. Resilience is what matters. Heart is what matters. And in the end, I had all 3 while they had none. I won not because I became a billionaire, but because I became someone I'm proud to be. Someone who lifts others up instead of tearing them down. Someone who values people over profit, even while building profitable companies. My family's betrayal was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was also the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to become the woman I was always meant to be. Sarah Mitchell, survivor, CEO, billionaire, philanthropist, mother, wife, and most importantly, someone who knows her own worth, regardless of what anyone else thinks. They threw me away. I became priceless, and that's the best revenge of all.